All right, so my name is Kyle Davis, and I'm a clinical psychologist. I actually work over at St. Luke's, and I do a number of different things there. I have a little insomnia clinic, and I also work on some of the big behavioral health initiatives within the St. Luke's system. And I have another little project where I teach health behavior change classes for a weight loss program there. And I've kept doing that because it's just something that it's really fun for me to teach those kinds of classes and help people change behaviors that really last a lifetime. Um, So I'm going to give you a little information about how this presentation format works. So I think you all can see my PowerPoint slides. You can also see me on the webcam, and you're going to see that I will ask you a lot of questions throughout the presentation. The way I like to interact with people in these types of classes is to use the chat box function. So Cindy, to answer your question, I can see what you type. And actually, I think everybody else in the group can see what you're typing too. So I'm going to be, like I said, asking you all a lot of questions, and we'll use that chat box to interact with each other. Just because it's easier for me to manage it that way than having everybody try to talk over each other on the phone. So does that sound good to everybody? All right, you guys are on it. Okay, so a little bit of background about this presentation itself. So back when I was in graduate school, I was invited to author a book chapter on how to help patients engage in physical activity. So the book that we were working on was called Physical Activity Across the Lifespan, and it talked about using physical activity interventions for all sorts of different problems that people run into across their lives. The editors of the book realized once they were getting to the end of it that they didn't have anything in the book about how to actually help people engage in physical activity, and so that's where the idea for that book chapter came from. And as an eager graduate student, I jumped at the opportunity to publish something like that, and then I ended up getting invited out to do this presentation for a group of healthcare providers, and that was kind of a summary of that book chapter. So that's what you all will be seeing today, is a summary of this book chapter that was published a few years ago. But I think this is probably a lot more fun than just going through and reading that chapter. So one of the questions I had for you all was, I am really curious to know what kinds of backgrounds people have in this room. So I believe this presentation was advertised to different types of healthcare providers out there that are part of the Janus network. And I was really curious to know just kind of what your all backgrounds are and what type of healthcare providers you are, whether that's a peer support specialist or some kind of other healthcare provider. I'd really like to know just kind of where you all are coming from. Okay, so Jill's a nurse practitioner. We got some peer support specialists. Carrie's a behavioral health nurse. Cool. Cindy's an LCSW, habilitative interventionist, peer support specialist. We got a really nice cross-section of different disciplines here. So I think that'll be a fun mix for all of us. All right, so some of the goals for our presentation tonight are to get everybody in the room thinking about how, or in our virtual room, thinking about how their patients could benefit from physical activity. We're going to talk about some specific strategies to help your patients find motivation to exercise. And really what we'll find out is that is by far one of the most important components. We'll talk about, or once people have the motivation to exercise, how you can help them set goals to actually engage in physical activity. And then once they get started, um, we'll talk about strategies to help them keep that up over time. So I've always been drawn to physical activity because it's really one of the only things that we all have access to in some form or another. And we know that it's super effective for a number of different types of physical and mental health conditions. It's like the most obvious thing to help us out, but it's so difficult to actually do sometimes. So we know that if healthcare providers can help their patients exercise, then we're going to be able to really, make big differences across the board. Like all those medications we prescribe and things like that may not actually be necessary sometimes if people were engaging in exercise regularly, if they were eating well. We could really help out our healthcare system tremendously if we were able to do that on a regular basis. So another question for you all. So how do you all typically help your patients develop exercise plans? Like you want somebody you're working with to start exercising. How do you go about that? Cindy, I think you can get the PowerPoint after this. We can make that available to you. Yeah, but for now, how do you try to get your patients to exercise? Okay, so Jill's saying you have a discussion with them. Okay, she wants a handout for it. Printed resources. Oh, Rachel, you're actually exercising with them. That's pretty hard to beat. Cindy's saying do a group. Now, is that a group exercise or a group where you talk about getting people to exercise? Terry's building it into her program, making them exercise when they're there. That's not a bad idea. All right, anything else? Yeah, good call, Cindy. Like if they make other connections and start developing plans, and that's super helpful. Now, the follow-up question to that is, it seems like most people are probably struggling with getting their patients to exercise. I'm just kind of making an assumption there that this probably isn't the easiest part of your practice. Why do you think it's so difficult? Why is it so hard to get our patients to exercise? Distractions in their lives? They're not adequately motivated? Oh, maybe sedating medications, I'm guessing, Cindy. Looking for easier alternatives. Yeah, Terry, we don't really have to think about our patients, do we? We can just think about ourselves too for this question. All right, nice. Got all sorts of different responses there. I think everybody had really great answers. Definitely all true. So I think a lot of the times, the reasons that people really struggle with exercise is because it's something that they think they should do for themselves, but they haven't come up with their own intrinsic motivating factors to help keeping them, or the plans to keep this stuff up over the long term. And if you want to think about it in a different way, the benefits of the exercise don't outweigh the cost of it, at least in terms of how they're thinking about it. And as long as we're in that kind of situation, it's going to be really hard to get them to do that. And one of our jobs as healthcare providers is help them realize the benefits or get to or structure their exercise in such a way that it becomes to be more beneficial to them than it is costing them something. So another question for y'all. Why would you want your patients to exercise? So specifically, what, why or how does this help with psychological or people's state of their mental health? What kind of psychological benefits are there to physical activity, or what would you expect to change in somebody if they were exercising regularly in terms of their mental health? Better sleep. Yes, Terry, as long as you're not exercising right before they go to bed. I'm not going to go off on an insomnia tangent, but you're totally right. Shelby says the runner's high, the endorphins that we get activates our different neurotransmitter systems. Yeah. And if you look at the literature, we think that it could actually be several different groups of neurotransmitters. So everything from our dopaminergic system to endogenous cannabinoids to the same neurotransmitters that are affected by opiates. Oh yeah, Wendy says learning and memory. Definitely. Okay, so generally people are saying like depression, sleep, learning and memory. Yeah, you guys got most of them. So other things that physical activity has been demonstrated to help out with are anxiety, and then also as a intervention for substance use disorders. So sometimes if we can get people really engaged in something like exercise, it helps them cope with substance use. Now, what about the physiological benefits of exercise? So exercise is cool because it's not just the psychological benefits, there are tons of physiological benefits too. Once again, what kind of things would you expect to improve physiologically if people were exercising regularly? Hypertension, diabetes, weight, cardiovascular health. There's our nurse chiming in. Thank you, Jill. You got almost everything. You took all the answers for everyone else. Right, anyone else have anything to add to that? Oh, Shelby, that's a great one, yeah. So less stress on your joints equals better control of chronic pain. Jill, what does CA mean? I got the rest of your, oh, cancer, okay, thank you. All right, I think you all have already come up with more things than I did. So obesity, heart disease, cancer. Oh, I did have cancer in there. It's been a while since I made this. Type 2 diabetes, stroke, hypertension, and just all-cause mortality. So people that exercise regularly tend to live longer than people that don't. Oh yeah, balance for sure, Wendy. So this presentation is broken down into 3 different stages. So the first of which is motivation. So we know that motivation is going to be fundamental to getting people to exercise. So not surprisingly, your patients have probably thought about exercising before, but if they're not doing it currently, they probably have failed to start or maintain physical activity along the way. Like I was saying earlier, we really need to try to create a situation for the patient where the benefits of physical activity are going to outweigh the cost of that activity for them. So what we're going to do is learn some skills from motivational interviewing to help the patients identify any ambivalence that they have about doing this, so that we can get them closer to engaging in physical activity. And whenever we're using motivational interviewing, really what our goal is to help the patient articulate why they want to do this. I think a very typical way providers go about doing this is we try to convince our patients all the reasons why they need to do it. And just to do a little exercise here, I want you all to monitor your own reaction to what I'm about to say. So let's imagine that I'm your healthcare provider. And so for each and every one of you, I'm generally pretty concerned about your health. There are a number of things that have come up in your labs that look like they're kind of headed in the wrong direction, and they've been going that way for some time. And really what I need you to do is exercise more. You know, it's really all you have to do. If you can just exercise regularly, and I only need you to exercise 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, then most of your problems here are going to go away. So yeah, I just need you to do that, okay? How did that make you all feel? What was your response to that? First things that go through your mind when I tell you that you need to start exercising. Blah. Jill says okay. She's the most compliant patient. Okay, yeah, so Cindy, a totally normal response. As soon as I tell you to do something, you start thinking of all the reasons that you're not going to be able to do it. Okay, so it seems like there's a mix of responses. Some people are already on board with exercise. They're just saying, yeah, thanks, Doc, I'll keep it up. Yeah, Terry says, sounds great, means nothing to me. It wasn't any new information for you, was it, Terry? You already knew that you would be better off exercising, and if you knew exactly how to do that, well, then you would have already been doing it. Wendy, I don't know what kind of exercise. Maybe I would tell them to go walk. That's probably the most common one. All you gotta do is walk 30 minutes a day. Okay, so the basic point here is that if I tell you to do something, a totally normal reaction for most of us, unless we're already doing it, is to think of the reasons why we don't want to do it. So, however, that's what we almost always do in healthcare. So we kind of bang our heads against the wall, but we keep doing the same thing and we keep getting the same results. So in order for that to change, we have to do something a little bit different. So whenever you are, and Terry, just to your point, a lot of times the doctors probably aren't even talking about it. They may click the box that said they provided weight loss counseling, but I honestly think most of them are not taking the time to talk about exercise, and probably because they've learned that whatever they tell them doesn't really work that well. They already tried telling all their patients to exercise and they didn't do it, so why would they keep telling them that? So whenever we're dealing with motivational interviewing, we're really trying to come at a very different kind of approach. My goal is to help, like I said earlier, help the patient figure out why they need to do this. And we pay very close attention to the actual words that are coming out of our patients' mouths. We want them to be expressing reasons, or their desire, ability, reasons, and need to change. We call any type of language that is along those lines change talk. We call any language not to change what you're doing sustain talk. So in motivational interviewing, I'm trying to get as much change talk as I possibly can, and I'm trying to get as little sustain talk. So for example, when I tell you to do something, I'm more likely to get sustained talk from you. So I don't really want to tell you what to do because I know that that's not going to be very helpful. I'm going to use another set of strategies for motivational interviewing to help get you producing or saying these types of change talk statements. So for you all to remember, it's really helpful that this acronym DARN stands for desire, ability, reason, and need. Those are the types of themes that we want our patients talking about if we're doing a good job of using this strategy of communicating with them. So you say, well, how do you do that? That sounds good. So we use some of the core interviewing skills for motivational interviewing. So we can remember that with the acronym. It's, again, motivational interviewing, like many other things, is acronym heavy. This particular acronym is OARS. So we use open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summary statements to help engage our patients around change talk. How many of you have heard of this OARS stuff before? Oh, Shelby, yeah. Were you in the peer support training that I did? Oh, you did a different one, okay. Anyways, it would have been the same type of material, just somebody else was using it. So OARS are kind of like the bread and butter of motivational interviewing. This is the kind of stuff that we use all the time, and really it's just a helpful way of communicating with anybody, especially when you're trying to help them change behaviors. So let's get into more detail about those. So open-ended questions. So really, the definition of an open-ended question is just a question that can't be answered with a simple yes or no or one-word kind of response. What do you all think the benefits of asking open versus closed questions would be? Yeah, so Jill, why is it important that they can't just answer yes or no? How is that helpful for you and them? Oh, okay, Shelby's saying it makes them really think about it. You get more details, you get engaged in conversations. Yes, all very, very good responses. You're totally right. Yeah, we get to see their thought process. So, yeah, you guys nailed it. So it really gets them to think before they respond and really kind of express things in their own ways. And then that gives us insight into what's going on for them. And too many closed kinds of questions can really disengage the patient, and you can miss out on all sorts of important information. Now, maybe you've been in a doctor's office before where you just get a ton of yes or no questions, like, have you had problems with this, and this? I know that disengages me pretty fast. You know, I'd rather them just ask me, like, what's going on with you, instead of asking me all the things that aren't going on. So if you were going to start thinking about different open-ended questions that you could use to ask a patient about physical activity, and your goal is to get change talk or those darn kinds of statements, what kind of questions do you think you could ask? What would you say to your patient using an open-ended question? Okay, how does it How does it feel whenever you do exercise? Okay, what have you done for yourself lately? Now let's remember, whenever we're asking these questions, we're trying to get responses that talk about the patient's desire, ability, reason, and need to exercise. Okay, what kind of activities? That's starting to speak a little bit to their ability. Yeah, that's a really good one, Terry. So tell me about your history with exercise. You know, whenever you ask that, you're going to find out a lot about, you know, what they were capable of in the past. Why do you think it's important to exercise? That could be a very good one. I maybe modify that a little bit and say, why would it be important for you to exercise? Because if you just say, why do you think it's important to exercise, you're probably going to get like, to lose weight, to feel better. But we'd want to personalize it just a little bit more so we don't just get those stock kind of responses. Another thing you may think about asking somebody would be like along the lines of, tell me about your history with exercise, and I tell you what you did or what they did. You could ask them like, well, why were you doing it back then? You know, and so that starts tapping into the reasons or need that they were doing it at that point in time, and then it gives, you know, it raises the question of, well, you know, if those things were important to you then, like how does that relate to where you're at now? You know, maybe those same things are important now, maybe they're not. Any other questions you all would ask? Shelby, I'm going to build on one of your other responses. So, like, whenever you said, how does that feel for you? One of the things that you may want to ask, just a very slight modification, would be like, how do you think it would feel if you were exercising regularly like you want to be? So kind of getting them to look into the future and imagine if they were doing what they wanted, how that would make them feel. Um, and then we start getting into some of that desire. All right, any other questions that you all would want to ask, or examples of open-ended questions? It's really kind of a unlimited area here, and I know it's tough when you don't have a specific patient to be thinking about. All right, next up we've got affirmations. So affirmations are essentially just statements that we can make about what somebody else is doing that recognizes their effort, their worth, and just really validates whatever they're trying to do. And they also provide lots of support and encouragement. One of the things that we can do as healthcare providers is serve as cheerleaders for our patients a lot of times. That can be one of the most helpful things, just to know that as a patient, that if you know that somebody else out there cares about what you're trying to do, that can be really empowering. And one little note I like to make about affirmations is that they're different than praising. And so a lot of times people would make a statement like, I think you're doing a really good job in such and such, or I can tell such and such about you. And really, like, we want to try to stay away from that language because it can have a little bit of like a paternalistic kind of feel to it, or maybe even a little judgmental sometimes. And it really, we can remove any of that just by using you instead. So I may say something like, you've really been working hard at this past week. You know, you didn't think you were going to be able to get started with this walking program, but you were able to do it 3 days in the past week. That's amazing. So I'm not saying like I think you did a good job. I just want to reflect what the patient did. Does that make sense? Okay. Glad you are with me. I hope that's not too annoyingly nuanced, but I think it can make a big difference whenever you hear those words from your provider. All right, next up, reflective listening. This is something that I suspect all of you are pretty good at already. So whenever we're using reflective listening, really what we're trying to do is make a guess as to what the patient means. What do you think it does whenever what does it do for the patient whenever you're making these kinds of reflections? What's the purpose of that? Yeah, you're showing you're listening. Yeah, Jill said, let them know we understand. And to follow up on that, Jill, it also lets them know that maybe we don't understand. You know, so like if you make a reflection and you say like, oh, you really want to exercise because you're trying to lose weight, they may say, no, I'm not really trying to lose weight. Like I just want to be able to climb Table Rock this summer. You say, oh, okay. Well, that's way more helpful for me to know than for me just assuming that you're trying to lose weight or something. Yeah, so it gives them a chance to clarify if we're wrong. It helps them feel understood, and it shows that we're paying attention. So there are different levels of reflection. So the simplest type of reflection is just kind of repeating back exactly what somebody says. And then that goes all the way to these complex reflections where we're really trying to make inferences about what the patient means or without knowing really exactly at all. Or maybe you're tying together a little bit of information that the patients let you know about themselves and just kind of adding that in to see if you're right. I think one of the coolest statistics about motivational interviewing is whenever you do really comprehensive studies of what people are saying whenever they are the best at helping their patients change behavior, we know that those most skillful in motivational interviewing are making 2 or 3 reflections on average for every question they ask, where a typical healthcare provider, and this is probably somebody that's actually doing pretty good, they're asking 10 questions for every reflection that they make. So it feels kind of weird to be making this many reflections whenever you're actually trying this out for the first time. But you can rest assured that it's actually pretty hard to make too many reflections. As long as you're not like just mimicking what the patient is saying, they'll probably appreciate what you're doing, just because it really helps them feel understood. You may notice that I make tons of reflections. Whenever you all type the comments in the chat box here, I like to reflect on what you all are saying to make sure that I'm actually getting what you are trying to say. So it's a little meta experience here where we're doing what we're teaching about. Okay, and then finally with the OARS skills, we have summaries. So a summary can really just be thought of as a reflection that's pulling together several statements a patient has made. So maybe you've been talking to somebody like 15, 20 minutes, and maybe you know this person for a while and they've told you different things about themselves. A summary statement is really trying to pull all that information together and presenting it back to the patient. The cool thing about the summaries is it allows you to hand pick what you want to reflect. And so it really allows you to focus on building on the patient's strengths, and you can choose the aspects of the conversation that you want to. So if somebody was telling me all the reasons that they didn't want to exercise, maybe they spent 2 minutes telling me all the reasons why they couldn't do it, and they told me one reason that they may possibly want to exercise. If I'm reflecting this back to them in a summary statement, I'm not going to say probably much about the reasons why they couldn't do it. I'm only going to pick to reflect back to them the reason that they do want to do it. And another cool thing about these summary statements is that it allows the patient to hear their experience from like a more objective point of view. And when you do that, it can help them kind of see the big picture instead of like the little barriers that they're getting hung up on. So an example of what a summary statement may look like would be, Mr. Smith, you know, whenever we first met, you told me that one of the main reasons that you've been wanting to start exercising is just kind of your mobility. You know, you've noticed that it's been tough to play with your grandkids like you would like to be able to, and so one of really the main reasons here was exercising more so that you could build up your mobility so that you could be more active with your grandkids. And Mr. Smith, I think it goes without saying that you want to be more active with your grandkids because you have a great time whenever you're playing with them. You know, and now that they're getting more involved in sports, I mean, you told me about the your youngest just started the T-ball league. You know, that you would want to be able to be out there and help them out more. So anyways, in my example there, you can see how I was like picking from different things that the patient had told me, and I'm presenting them back to them to try to make a cohesive story about why they would want to be exercising regularly. You may also have noticed that everything I said was what the patient had told me and what they wanted to get out of it. There was nothing about why I thought they should be exercising. All right, and finally, one of the other most important things when you're trying to use these OR skills and get your patients to or express this change talk is finding out what's important to your patient in their lives. It's amazing to me how little we know about our patients and why they would ever want to actually change their behaviors. We take it for granted that, or we just assume that, well, people want to be healthy, therefore they should do whatever I say. And that's just doesn't get to a deep enough level to really make that happen for people. So whenever we're talking about values, we're really talking about just getting to know them and understanding what the most important things are in a person's life. Whenever I'm doing an intake with one of my patients, I literally say, and can you tell me more about what some of the most important things are in your life? And out of my whole interview, I get to know them better in that one statement than I do probably the rest of my clinical assessment. The other thing is that you find out whenever you really get to know about what's important in people's lives is you find out that they're probably, or if they're normal people, they're living inconsistently somehow with some of their values or their goals. So like in my Mr. Smith example, let's say he's not exercising at all, but one of the most important things in his life is spending time, or his family. And one of the ways that he enjoys that is by being physically active with his grandkids. So if I can help Mr. Smith understand this disconnect between what he's currently doing and what some of the most important things are in his life, well, then I can help him begin to develop that intrinsic motivation to start exercising. Now it's not exercising because everybody tells him he should. It's exercising so that he can spend more quality time with his grandkids. What do you think people say whenever you ask them what some of the most important things are in their lives? What would you say? Yes, family. That's by far the number one I hear. Yep, family, health. Every once in a while somebody says work. I look at them like they're crazy. No, just kidding. Work can be important too, and hobbies can definitely be important parts of people's lives too. The main thing to remember here, if you're getting to know somebody well, and hopefully you know the people you're working with well enough to be able to answer some of these questions about them. Like, we literally want you to be able to say, like, I know this about my patient, and then you can start making the connections between physical activity and what's important in their lives. You can probably do that in somehow. Oh, Terry, money. Money is the most important thing. I don't get that one very often. Sometimes I get financial stability. That's probably what you mean. Not sure how your physical activity relates to money. Maybe spending money. I want a new mountain bike. Okay, I realize that I've been talking a whole lot and getting lots of examples, and I'm getting behind on my presentation. I think I've been doing a good job of providing some of these role plays or scenarios as we've gone, so I'm going to skip through this role play because I want to make sure we get through the whole presentation. All right, next up, implementing behavioral plans. So you talk to your patient, you understand their values, you've been using your ORA strategies, and your patient is saying, yeah, I really think I want to do this. Now you got them where you want them, but it's really important to set them up for success at this point, because we want them to have positive experiences. We want them to accomplish their goals so that they feel good about what they're doing so that they can keep it up. So whenever we're helping our patients set goals, we want to get to, well, once again, use what we know about the patient to understand what a long-term goal would look like for them. Once we establish what a long-term goal would look like maybe they just say, like, I want to be more functional with my grandkids. We say, well, what do you think it would take to get to where you want? Like, what would you have to be able to do physically to be able to do that? And people are pretty good at coming up with this stuff. Then you can help them set short-term goals to get to where they want. So maybe Mr. Smith says, like, well, you know, I need to be able to walk for at least an hour to do that because, you know, that's how long the t-ball game lasts, you know, and I want to be on my feet the whole time. And I know I'm going to have to be moving around. So now we've got this long-term goal of being able to walk for an hour, and that gives me a lot to work with in terms of setting short-term goals for him to help build up to it. So whenever we're thinking about this goal setting, we want to make sure that the patient is succeeding in the goals and that they're gaining confidence in their ability to do whatever they're trying to do. And it sure doesn't hurt if the goals that you're setting are accomplishment and/or pleasure-oriented. The accomplishment piece comes pretty naturally a lot of times with these kinds of goals. And if you can find any type of activity that the patient is going to have fun doing, actually I think that's what you should focus on. You know, they got to figure out something that they can actually enjoy doing. And if it's not because of the exercise itself, you know, a lot of these folks are not going to be experiencing runner's highs from walking 15 minutes a day. They need to get something else out of that walk, whether it's taking their dog for a walk, looking at the birds, or they're watching their favorite television program while they're walking in place in the living room. They got to get something else out of it besides just walking. Okay, so whenever we're goal setting, we often use the SMART goal framework. How many of you are familiar with SMART goals? Okay, looks like a couple of you are, and some of you aren't. So once again, SMART goals are an analogy, or an acronym that help us set really good goals. So the S stands for specific. You want to be able to answer the who, what, where, when, why, and how somebody is going to do something. The M stands for measurable. Basically, we want people to know exactly when they've accomplished what they've set out to do. And we can do that, and physical activity is super conducive to this. We can set time limits, we can set distances, we can count steps, you know, all sorts of ways to measure physical activity. The A stands for attainable. We want to make sure that the goals people are setting for them, that there's a very high chance that they're going to be able to succeed. We can often ask our patients, like, if you were to rate it on a 0 to 10, how likely do you think you are to complete your goal in the next week? If they say anything below an 8 or a 9, you need to be talking to them about breaking that goal into smaller pieces. We want to make sure that it's going to get done. R stands for relevant. We've got to know why this is important in this person's life. You know, if they say they want to start going to the gym, but they hate going to the gym and they've never enjoyed it, we're probably setting them up for failure. Chances of them just learning to love going to the gym is pretty slim, even if they think that that's what they're supposed to like. And T, timely, we want to set time limits on things. So that could mean, like, you know, walking for 15, 30 minutes. But it also means I'm going to walk Wednesday at 5 p.m. For 20 minutes. So, you know, setting dates and time limits on things to really help us, once again, make these goals as specific as possible. All right, once we have a SMART goal, one of the things that we can do is help our patients schedule activities. So we want to be very specific with our times and locations. If you set a good SMART goal, then this should be included. You can also use environmental and social contingencies when scheduling activities to increase that reinforcement and accountability. This is exactly what, I think, was it Terry, were you telling me you lead some of these group exercise classes, like in therapy groups or something? Yeah, so like you really take advantage of those social contingencies. You know, a lot of times these folks will say they wouldn't do it on their own, but if they're in that group with their friends, then that's enough to get them going. Same thing goes, you know, if you ask yourself, well, if you were going to go on a hike whenever this conference is over, would you be more likely to do that just on your own, or more likely if your friend, you had already made plans with your friend to meet you right at 7:15? I think for most of us, we definitely know we'd be more successful if we'd already promised a friend that we would meet them at a specific time. And then other things to think about, so finding group activities, just like Terry's done with her group, getting our patients to think about planning activities with friends, so we build that accountability in. And then maybe you get them to sign up for some kind of event, whether it's a 5K or some kind of walk around town. Having those kinds of activities on the horizon help keep us on track with our training programs. All right, and with structuring activities, we want to break the activities into as small steps as necessary for that individual. Things to be thinking about: what do they need to participate? How would they get there? Who are they going to go with? And start making a plan to help them meet their needs. And you can also, you know your patient population better than anyone else probably does. So try to imagine the potential barriers that they're going to run into so that you can help them problem solve around those. I'm going to go really quickly. I want to do one quick example here of setting a SMART walking goal. Emily, can you come over here?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to drag Emily into this role-playing example real quick, because I want you all to see what this kind of looks like in practice. So, thanks, Emily. Can everybody see Emily now? All right, so a little background for you. Emily is one of my patients, and I've been talking to her about setting some goals, and she said that her goal for the next week is that she wants to start walking more. And to me, that doesn't quite cut it in terms of meeting the criteria for a SMART goal. So, yeah, so Emily, tell me a little bit more about this walking goal. How would you know that you had accomplished your goal for the week?
I just would feel good about knowing that I went out and got some exercise and took care of my goal.
Okay, so you would know. So for you, it would be knowing that you felt better.
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned that that may or may not happen, and we want to set your goal up in such a way that you know you've accomplished it, even if you don't automatically feel better. Because who knows, you could be having a bad day on the day that you walk, and I don't want that to ruin your goal completion. So if you were to think about like when you wanted to do this and how long you wanted to walk for, what would you think?
I would say maybe like 4 times a week for 30 minutes each time.
Okay, so 4 days a week, 30 minutes, and what time would you do that?
Well, I would love to do it in the mornings.
Okay.
Before work.
Before work, and for you, like what time would that be?
7:30.
Okay, so you would need to be out the door, ready to go on your walk at 7:30.
Yes.
Get your 30 minutes in, come back, get ready for work. How realistic do you feel like that would be for you to accomplish in the next week on a 0 to 10?
A 4.
A 4. Okay.
Maybe a 5.
Patients tell me that all the time. Everybody's really ambitious, whenever they set these goals. If we were to change that goal to like, let's say, 1 day in the next week, how would you rate your confidence about that?
I think I could give that a 9.
A 9. Okay, I'll take it. Okay. So let's set your goal to do 1 day next week, and then anything you do beyond that is a bonus.
Okay.
Okay, so if you do it 1 day next week, when would you do it?
I would do it on Thursday.
Okay, so Thursday, 7:30 a.m., walking for 30 minutes. Do you know where you would go?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to take your word for it. Okay. So you know your 30-minute loop. I don't need to know it. You just need to know it. So you know exactly where you're going. And finally, why do you want to do this?
I think my dog would like me more.
Yes, your dog. Yes, my dog feels the same way about walks. Okay, so thank you very much for participating in that. How did you all know that that was a SMART goal, or that actually I'll ask you, do you think we accomplished our goal of setting a SMART goal? All right, looks like people are saying yes. And how long did that take? I did have a very compliant patient on my hands. But she did, I didn't ask her to, I didn't plan anything for her, so she kind of gave me a tough one at the beginning there. So, but that's the kind of thing that a lot of your patients are going to say, like, well, I'll just walk until I feel good, or something like that. But whenever the outcome is a feeling, we don't have that much control over our feelings. So I try to get them to set up with something else. Cindy, you're right. You will get a lot of yeah buts if you're trying to convince somebody to do something. So that's their sustained talk and their barriers to change. If you can get them or come at it from this perspective, I think you may have better luck in decreasing those yeah buts. You think your patients just tell you what they think you want them to hear. How do you get them to follow through? Well, I'm so glad you asked, Jill. Let's look at our next chapter. So how do you get them to maintain activity and prevent relapse? I'll tell you exactly what I would do, Jill. Um, I get them to track this stuff for themselves and have them share it with me whenever I see them again. So all sorts of ways to monitor activity now. So you can like write this stuff down in an activity chart. That's the old-fashioned way of doing this stuff. Now we've got a million other tools to keep track of physical activity and other outcomes important to the client. Now, I know not everybody is going to be able to afford some kind of fitness tracker, um, but even just keeping track of like how much you're walking, like in a notepad or something, is enough to hold people accountable. So, Jill, if you get to a plan with one of your patients and they tell you that they're going to walk that 30 minutes one day a week, and you've got that SMART goal dialed down, we got to hold them accountable, and so either you're following up with them on the phone app right when they're supposed to do it, or even better, you're having them call you and leaving a message for you after they've accomplished their goal, so that they know that there's some accountability out there. And ideally, we're getting them to keep track of what they're doing for themselves, because it's important for them to do that. It's not just accountability to us, but it's important to them. So some of the other things that you can get people interested in that they may want to look at, the relationships between physical activity, would be things like their mood. Maybe they're doing, I know that several of you are therapists out there. Maybe they're keeping track of their exercise in relation to their mood. So they're keeping mood diaries, and we're keeping track of exercise too, to seeing if physical activity has any impact on their mood. Same thing goes with anxiety levels. A lot of people track their weight. You can use tools like MyFitnessPal to keep track of your physical activity and your weight and your food all in the same place. A1C, blood pressure, sleep, you name it. We've got different ways of tracking it, and now there are all these online tools, apps, and as well, that we can do this stuff for free too, which is awesome. Have any of you done any self-monitoring, maybe for yourself or with a patient? So if you write in, say, like self or patient, if you've actually kept track of what somebody was doing with some kind of tool like this. Mikkel, awesome. Mikkel, what did you have your patients keeping track of? Okay, exercise and anxiety. How are they keeping track of their exercise? Okay, so they exercise with you in session. Oh, and then they're writing down walks on a calendar and looking at the relationships. Okay, yeah, that's great. Jill, interesting question. Let's hold on to that one for the end of the presentation. I'll stick around and answer some of these other kind of related questions. I definitely have opinions about that one. Okay, so some other things to be watching out for, helping our patients anticipate and overcome different obstacles that they're going to be running into. So what kind of obstacles do you think your patients run into with exercise? And I know we're going a little bit over time. I hope that's okay with you all. If you have to leave, we understand. Okay, weather, rural environments. Proper footwear. Pain. People will get sick. That's definitely true. Yeah, just like depression and anxiety, like that kind of stuff's going to get in the way sometimes. I'm guessing that's what you're talking about, Nikhil. All right, so this stuff, this applies to everybody. This is not just our patients, this is also us. These are all the different things that throw us off. So feeling tired, not having anyone to exercise with, um, feeling tired or fatigued, not feeling like you got an adequate workout facility, weather, poor health, even just feeling self-conscious about your appearance, not wanting to exercise because you don't want to be judged if you are exercising and you don't look the way you want to look. So we know all this stuff is inevitably going to happen. What do you think we do? How do we go about helping our patients with this? Well, I'm not seeing any responses immediately. So really what we want to do is sit down with our patients and ask them what barriers they think they may run into and talk to them about how they think they're going to overcome it. Once again, we really want the patient to come up with solutions for themselves. We don't want to tell them how to solve the problems. Because if they're solving the problems for themselves, they're a lot more likely to use the strategies. So we can use those or skills that we were talking about earlier to help the patient figure out how to address their own needs. Terry, yeah, when you're talking about setting attainable goals, you definitely are you're gonna pick up on some of the barriers. So just like with Emily, like one of her barriers would probably be time. Like she wanted to do it 4 days a week, but we knew the likelihood of that happening was low just because she'd probably run out of time to be able to do that 4 days of the week. So yeah, we did catch it by just asking or kind of going through that framework and setting a really good goal. No, I think another really important thing to point out is people are going to fall off the wagon, more often than not sometimes, especially at the beginning. And the most important thing we can do as healthcare providers is just helping them get back on track as soon as possible. And, to look at this stuff as an inevitable part of the process and that we really just want them to get started again as soon as they can and to not view relapse as like a major issue. It's just something that's going to happen and we can get back on track as soon as we're ready. So as a healthcare provider, we help, like some people were just saying, you provide empathy, you help them develop good goals, and you remind them why they wanted to do this in the first place, or you don't tell them why, you ask them why they wanted to do it in the first place, and you let them redirect themselves. And a lot of times you're going to find that people were too ambitious about the goals they were setting in the beginning. But if you can help them set a more attainable goal, you're going to increase their sense of accomplishment and self-efficacy in setting the goals. And that is so powerful. I'd rather somebody set a goal of walking 5 minutes in a week and accomplish it than set a goal of walking 5 minutes 30 days a week and do it 4 times, because then they say, well, I didn't meet my goal, I failed. And it's tough. It's harder to work with them with that. Whereas if they set the 5-minute goal and they accomplish it, they feel better about themselves. Of course, I'm going to push them to do more in the future, but I really want them to have that sense of success. Okay, final exercise here for you all. So let's imagine you've been working with the patient for several months. They've gotten into a regular habit of walking their dog in the evenings after work. However, it's August. It's recently gotten very hot, and your patient said, "Hey, it's too hot for me and my dog to walk in the evening. We're not doing that anymore." And you, as their healthcare provider, is noticing that their mood is really starting to decline. How could you help them get back on track? Maybe even just give me like a one-sentence question that you would ask your patient at the beginning of this. Yes, remind them about the dog. You could say something like, Emily, how does your dog feel about that? Because I know like one of the things that was most important to you when you started this was getting out with your dog, and if that's not happening, what's your plan now? Jill, that's great. Yeah, ask him. So, how did you feel whenever you're walking on a daily basis? And Emily probably says, "Well, it was really pretty great. You know, I spent good time with my dog. I was getting some more exercise. The dog was happy. They didn't chew up my shoes." Yeah, so I know I need to wrap this up, so I'll give you a few of my thoughts on this. So one of the first things that I would do would be to just empathize with the patient and say, like, yeah, it has been really freaking hot, but you know what? It's August in Boise, kind of to be expected. So yeah, it stinks, but we've got to figure out a better way to do this. So remind me again, why did you want to do this in the first place? And then we, like Teddy was saying, we get this information about the dog, and that was really important. We use Jill's question. We find out how they were feeling whenever they were doing it. So we're getting a lot of change talk whenever we're asking those questions. And then I say, okay, so it sounds like it was pretty important to you. You're feeling pretty good when you were doing it. Can you imagine any other way that you would be able to keep walking your dog even though it's so hot in the afternoons and evenings? So in this situation, I have to really resist the temptation to tell Emily to go walk in the morning. I know that that's the obvious answer, but I want her to tell me that instead of me telling her that, because it needs to be her own idea so that she doesn't resist it whenever I try to tell her what to do. Yes, Shelby, very hard to not jump in and answer those kinds of questions. You know that you're getting skilled in motivational interviewing when you recognize that urge to jump in and tell somebody what to do, but you don't do it and you ask a question that gets them to the same answer. Much easier said than done. Okay, so short summary here. We know that exercise, physical activity, is one of the most helpful things that we can do for ourselves for a number of conditions. Unfortunately, getting started and maintaining exercise is really difficult for most of us. That, you know, if you're not currently doing it, it's probably difficult for you. We know that strategies from motivational interviewing and cognitive behavioral therapy can be very helpful for therapists and other healthcare providers when they're working with these patients on these types of plans. And if we help patients develop a plan that is personally relevant to them, because we've been talking to them about their values and we understand how exercising fits in with the things that are important on their life, and we start developing plans that focus on enjoyable activities rather than things that patients are imagining that they should be enjoying, even though they may never actually enjoy that, then we're going to be so much better off than like letting our patients just try to go to the gym again and start failing, or sign up for CrossFit and get beat up and hate it. So, and by beat up, I mean just like the workouts are really hard, not that like people hit you there. And then coming up with a backup plan for dealing with obstacles is really essential to relapse prevention. And we can use our own experience as humans to understand the obstacles that people are going to run into. And you'll have to know your patient and see like how insightful they are about the problems that they may have. You know, and Jill was asking about, well, they just tell me what they want to hear. I would ask them a lot of questions about those obstacles. And if somebody's just trying to appease you, that would be the place where they may actually tell you what their obstacles are, because you're really trying to help them overcome it. And they're probably thinking about what those barriers and obstacles are already. All right, so that's the end of the presentation. If y'all have questions for me outside of the presentation, I'm going to stick around for a little bit too. You can email me at my email address here. Other than that, thank you all for the participation. It was really fun working with you all tonight. And I'll, like I said, I'll stick around here on the chat window and answer questions that come up. But I don't want to keep everybody that doesn't want to stay. And they just don't want to be rude. Okay, so everybody, Jill's question. She's prescribing psych meds. She knows that the psych meds are affecting patients' weight, and she's weighing them at every appointment. Do I think weighing them is helpful or harmful? Jill, my question is, what are you trying to get out of weighing them at every appointment in this situation? Are these patients that are actively working on weight loss, or just you're just doing it as part of a standard assessment when a patient comes in? Yeah, you literally have to keep track of BMI sometimes, probably. Well, I'll give you or just my kind of opinion on this. And I'm gonna stop can I stop the recording and keep chatting?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.